Every team in this tournament fits a pattern. Favorites play with control, underdogs play with fear, hosts play with pressure, except one team. One team has been breaking the model since the first match. The model classified all 48 teams into predictable behavioral categories before this tournament even started. 47 teams matched their category almost perfectly. One team did not. One team has been doing the opposite of what its ranking, its history, and its role should predict. In this video, we are going to show you exactly how the model classifies every team in a World Cup. We are going to show you which categories exist, and we are going to reveal the one team that has broken every single one of them, and what that means for the rest of this tournament. Before we can understand what makes this team different, we need to understand how the model sees football in the first place. Every team entering a World Cup gets sorted into a behavioral category. This sorting happens before a single ball is kicked. It is based on historical data, ranking, resources, playing style history, manager tendencies, and squad profile. There are four primary categories. Category 1, the controllers. These are the favorites, teams with the highest rankings, the deepest squads, and the most tactical resources. The model predicts these teams will dominate possession, control tempo, and play with aggression because they have nothing to fear. They lose rarely, and when they do, it surprises everyone. Category 2, the survivors. These are the underdogs, teams that enter the tournament with limited resources and lower rankings. The model predicts these teams will play defensively, absorb pressure, and rely on counterattacks. They have everything to lose and very little margin for error, so caution defines their approach. Category 3, the pressured. These are host nations, or teams carrying heavy historical expectation. The model predicts these teams will play with visible anxiety, especially in early matches, because the weight of expectation affects decision-making under pressure. Host nations often start tournaments nervously before settling into rhythm. Category 4, the dark horses. These are teams with moderate rankings but unusual tactical flexibility. The model predicts these teams will adapt their style match to match, sometimes controlling, sometimes surviving, depending on the opponent. Every team in this tournament was pre-sorted into one of these four categories before the group stage began. And for 47 of the 48 teams, the model's prediction was accurate. Controllers controlled, survivors survived, pressured teams showed pressure, dark horses adapted, but one team refused to follow its assigned category. And the model has been wrong about this team in every single match. Let us look at what happened. This team was classified as a survivor. Moderate ranking, limited attacking resources historically, a defensive identity built over decades. The model expected exactly what it expects from every survivor: a low block, minimal possession, cautious counterattacking football, especially against stronger opponents. In their opening match against a much higher-ranked opponent, the model predicted a defensive performance with under 30% possession and fewer than 8 shots attempted. The actual result: 44% possession, 14 shots, aggressive pressing high up the pitch. This team played like a controller, not a survivor. This alone could be dismissed as an anomaly. One match, one tactical surprise. Teams occasionally overperform in a single game, but then it happened again. And again, against a team the model classified as weaker opposition, where the model expected this survivor team to seize control and dominate. The team instead sat back, defended deep, and played cautiously, exactly the opposite of what a confident, informed team should do against inferior opposition. The pattern was now undeniable. This team plays aggressively against stronger opponents and passively against weaker opponents. This is the exact reverse of what every behavioral model in football predicts. Teams are supposed to attack weaker opponents and defend against stronger ones. This team does the opposite. Why does this matter? Because if a team's behavior cannot be predicted, then everything downstream of that prediction becomes unreliable. Betting markets rely on behavioral prediction. Opposing coaches rely on behavioral prediction when preparing tactical game plans. Even fans rely on behavioral prediction when deciding how confident to feel before a match. When a team breaks the model, it does not just create one surprising result, it creates uncertainty for every future match that team plays. Opposing coaches who prepare for a survivor team will get a controller performance. Opposing coaches who prepare for a controller will get survivor-style defending. The unpredictability itself becomes a weapon. This is not randomness. Randomness would mean the team behaves inconsistently in a chaotic, unexplainable way, but this team's behavior, while inverted from expectation, is actually highly consistent. It consistently attacks stronger teams and consistently sits back against weaker teams. There is a pattern here, just not the pattern the model expected, which raises the real question: what determines this team's behavior, if not opponent quality in the traditional sense? Here is where the investigation gets interesting. When we strip away opponent ranking as the variable and instead look at something else, stakes, narrative pressure, and expectation, a different pattern emerges. This team plays aggressively when they are underestimated. This team plays passively when they are expected to win. Against the stronger opponent, nobody expected them to compete. There was no pressure to perform because failure was already the anticipated outcome. Freed from expectation, the team played loose, confident, and aggressive. Against the weaker opponent, suddenly the team was expected to dominate. The pressure to convert underdog status into decisive victory created hesitation. Players who normally play with freedom became cautious, aware that anything less than a win would be viewed as a disappointing underperformance. This is not a tactical pattern. This is a psychological pattern. And traditional football models, including the one used at the start of this analysis, are built primarily on tactical and statistical data. They are not built to measure something like freedom from expectation as a performance variable. This is the blind spot. Not just for this model, but for most models used in football analytics today. Expectation itself changes performance, and very few models directly quantify it. Once you see this pattern, you start to notice it in football history far beyond this single team. Teams that are written off often play their best football precisely because there is no psychological cost to losing. Teams that are expected to win often play tense, mistake-prone football precisely because the psychological cost of an unexpected loss is enormous. This explains many historical anomalies that traditional models struggle to account for: shock upsets by heavy underdogs, and equally shocking collapses by heavy favorites against supposedly inferior opposition. The team we are analyzing simply displays this pattern with unusual consistency and clarity. Where other teams show this effect occasionally, this team shows it in nearly every match, making the pattern statistically undeniable rather than anecdotal. If expectation is truly driving this team's behavior, then predicting their next performance becomes surprisingly simple. Identify how the team is being perceived heading into a match, not how strong their opponent actually is on paper. If they are underestimated, expect aggression, control, and confidence. If they are expected to dominate, expect hesitation, caution, and a much closer match than the ranking gap suggests. This insight changes how we should analyze this team's remaining matches in the tournament. If their next opponent is ranked significantly higher, expect this team to play with freedom. Expect high pressing, expect possession numbers well above what their historical ranking would suggest. Expect a genuinely competitive match regardless of the gap on paper. If their next opponent is ranked lower or considered a winnable match, expect the opposite. Expect a cautious, nervous performance. Expect a much closer scoreline than expected. Expect this team to potentially struggle against opposition they should comfortably beat. This is not just an interesting quirk about one football team. This is a demonstration that the standard behavioral models used throughout football analytics have a systemic blind spot. They fail to account for expectation and narrative pressure as legitimate performance variables, treating them as unmeasurable mentality factors rather than quantifiable inputs. Teams, coaches, and analysts who understand this dynamic gain a real predictive advantage over those relying purely on ranking-based models. And for viewers, it means watching this team's remaining matches with an entirely different lens. Not will the better team win, but which version of this team is going to show up, based on what the world expects from them. This raises a broader question about football intelligence itself. We build models based on measurable, historical data: possession statistics, pass completion rates, expected goals, defensive actions. These are quantifiable and precise. But football is played by human beings, and human beings respond to psychological conditions that are much harder to measure. Expectation, pressure, freedom, narrative, these forces are real. They shape outcomes, but because they resist easy quantification, most models simply ignore them or treat them as unexplainable noise. This team's pattern proves that the noise is not noise at all. It is signal. It is simply a different kind of signal, one that requires measuring perception and expectation rather than tactics and statistics alone. The question for the rest of this tournament is not just about this one team. It is about how many other patterns are hiding in plain sight, because our models are only looking for the kind of patterns they already know how to measure. So here is what we know. One team in this tournament has been playing in reverse of every traditional expectation, and the reason is not tactical, it is psychological. It is about what the world expects from them in any given match. The question moving forward is simple. As this team advances further, as expectations shift with every result, will their pattern hold? Will they continue playing aggressively when underestimated and cautiously when expected to dominate? Or will success itself change the pattern, removing the very condition that made their aggressive football possible in the first place? That is what we will investigate next. Because if expectation truly drives performance, then the moment this team becomes the favorite is the moment they become the most vulnerable. Soccer fashion, what the numbers saw first.